in on this Monday. Hi, everybody. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. We've got a great lineup for you this time. Up first, the lengths that government will go to keep public information secret. Chris Nakamoto, a reporter at WBRZ in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, found this out the hard way recently when he was arrested and led out of White Castle City Hall in handcuffs after refusing to leave the building. He was trying to get public records about a local official's use of public funds. ABC 7 investigator and author Chris Papst joins us now here in the studio. Chris, it's good to have you here. And joining us on the newsline is Chris Nakamoto. Chris, we appreciate your time very much this morning. Talk with us about what it was you were trying to get from local officials there on the ground in Louisiana.
Well, thank you for having me. We had submitted a public records request last week to try to get some details about how the mayor was spending money, the town's money, specifically on his compensation. So we had gotten a tip initially that there were some discrepancies with how a raise was provided to the mayor. Under the plan of government for White Castle City Hall, you have to actually go through strict protocols to give yourself a raise, like making sure the council approves it. So there were all sorts of discrepancies, so I had put in a public records request last week to try to get that information. That evening, the day I put in the request, I had two answers from the White Castle city officials to the three-part prong of my public records request. So the next day we said, okay, we got two answers. Let's go check on the third aspect of it. So I walked into City Hall last Wednesday trying to just check on the third aspect of the public records request. That's when we were met with all sorts of resistance.
How do you end up in handcuffs?
So I guess the people at the town hall were upset that I was there looking into this issue. So they had called a police officer to come in. He comes in through the building and tells us to leave. And I was basically asking him, on what grounds are you asking us to leave? We're here in a public building.
Were you
simply checking?
Sure. Were you at any time unruly? Did you mouth off? Was there anything physical that you initiated?
Not at all. Unfortunately, I had a photographer there, and he rolled on the entire thing. I mean, we were watching the doing our jobs.
And as you talk, we are watching all of the video of what happened. So, Chris, stand by for a moment. We bring in Chris Papst now. Chris, this is dramatic because it's recent. It was caught on tape. But as you know, and you've done a lot of investigative work here for us in Pennsylvania as well, you've written a book about some of the experiences you've had trying to get public information that should be public out into the public realm, even though it's a lot of times easier said than done. What do you make of what we're hearing from Chris Nakamoto?
Well, it's dramatic. We have that video and we can see it, and the people at home can see the video, but I'm sure that Chris would attest to this. This is not uncommon. I mean, it's uncommon to be put in the handcuffs and taken out, but it's not uncommon at all for government officials to fight and push back and not want to give you the information that you want to get. And this is a struggle that we deal with as investigative reporters, especially dealing with the government, on a consistent basis, because as reporters we want as much information as we can get so we can deliver that to the people. And the government agencies many times want to give us as little information as they possibly can under the law. So in 1967 we got these Freedom of Information Acts coming from the federal government that then the states passed very similar versions, and they create 9 categories under the federal government that they can put this information into and say, we don't have to give it to you. So the government is always trying to find ways to get that information into one of these 9 categories, and then as reporters we're always trying to find ways to get that information, and it does lead to the confrontation between reporter and government, like you saw with Chris.
And as citizens, I think we all acknowledge that there is information that needs to be secret. The issue becoming, of course, when is there an abuse of the protections that government has, as opposed to, I want to shield myself from embarrassment, or there's a scandal and I don't want you to find out about it. This is clearly not one of the 9 reasons that government can legitimately keep information secret. This is something else, and it's for all of us as a society to sort out which is which.
And what Chris did is what I have done before. You go into these public places and you don't create a scene, and you simply say, I want the information that is entitled to me under the Freedom of Information Act, and they don't want to give it to you. Now, but with that said, I'd like to ask Chris a question,
yeah, of course.
because there is a legal ramification here, and that is there are public places that we cannot go into. There are federal parks that require a fee, and if you go on those without the fee, you can be hit with trespassing. Schools can arrest people for trespassing. If you go onto the school property, they ask you to leave, and you don't. There's many federal buildings in Washington, D.C. the public cannot go into. So, Chris, what are you hearing as far as what the legalities are of what happened here with your being arrested after being asked to leave?
So my charge was remaining after being forbidden, since I was asked to leave, and I said I wasn't going to leave. We weren't in any restricted area of City Hall. We were simply in the lobby checking on our public records request. No one even behind the counter asked me to leave. The first I heard that they wanted me out of there was when the officer approached me and said, you need to leave. And that's when I said, well, on what grounds? What grounds are you asking me to leave? Because we're in a public place. We have a right to be here. We're checking on a public records request. If they're handling me this way and I have a photographer with me, imagine how they handle just average Joe citizen in there trying to check on a public records request they might submit.
In terms of the money that you were trying to track down, did the mayor give himself a raise in a way that didn't comport with procedure? And can you talk about the issue of mileage reimbursement? It looks like potentially there was mileage reimbursement that didn't fit with city policy there in White Castle?
That's correct. That was the third aspect that we were waiting on. They have a specific ordinance on the books that says the mayor is not eligible to receive mileage. So on Monday night, they had tried to clean up that mess by trying to re-amend the ordinance that's on the books saying he can't receive mileage. So once they actually answered our public records request the day after my arrest, it was figured out that the city paid him $8,000 in mileage reimbursements for money he was not eligible according to city ordinance.
Now, Chris Papst, you're always after local officials here in the Washington area to provide information that you think is relevant to whatever story you're working on, and you've got a stack of papers there that illustrate. It might seem comical at first as you show this, but it's not so comical really in the big picture in terms of some of the obstacles you encounter during the course of your work each day.
Sure. So as we mentioned, we're always, as journalists, trying to get as much information as we can, and the government is always trying to give us as little information as they can. So last year, after the L'Enfant incident with Metro, we had filed a series of Freedom of Information Act requests, and this is what we get back. So this is page after page after page after page. There's 13 pages.
This is the ultimate redacted set of redacted documents.
This is what we get back from a Freedom of Information Act request. 13 pages of this. Adverbs are taken out of here, Bruce. There is not one word on this entire page, and the government is saying that all of this falls under one of those 9 criteria where they don't have to give it out, and this is what we're fighting to get.
I'm curious as to what you were, if you're able to say without disclosing a story that maybe you're still in the process of working on, but I'm curious what you were after, and why rather than go through the charade of wasting all that ink and paper? We know how expensive the ink is.
Of course.
What were you going for there?
Safety. We just wanted to know what the safety protocol is, what the security protocol is, and that is what they said. We can't release our security protocol. Well, how are we supposed to inform the public on if the security protocol was followed or if it needs to be amended if this is what we get back when we try to get the information that we're trying to get for the people, the 800,000 people a day, including myself, that ride Metro? And this is what we're battling. This is what Chris had to battle with, and this is pretty common, Bruce.
Chris, you're the chief investigative correspondent there at WBRZ, the ABC affiliate in Baton Rouge. Big picture, to what extent are the people in charge of records complying with reasonable requests, and to what extent, even now in 2016, do we still find the door closed when in reality it should be open, public information being kept secret in a way that doesn't comport with what the folks behind the Freedom of Information Act back in the day envisioned?
You know, I'm very familiar with the public records laws here in Louisiana. I mean, this was just a routine request that I had put in, something that is not out of the ordinary whatsoever. And, you know, I've filed probably dozens upon dozens of these requests in other municipalities, and it's never been an issue. So the fact that I was not able to get these documents when I put in this very routine, run-of-the-mill public records request and was met with, handcuffs and hauled away for simply just asking about the mayor's compensation, which is taxpayer money. It really raises even more questions about what else could they possibly be hiding if they don't want me to see this. We're certainly not going to go away just because this happened. It's going to fuel us to ask even more questions and look at even more things that they're doing in that town.
Are you facing any charges, and has there been any apology from anyone in terms of what happened to you there?
There's been no apology, and yes, I'm still facing that remaining after forbidden charge. So what's next for me is I have to go to court on April 28th, and I guess that's when it will be determined what happens with that charge.
And the station.
Here's what's interesting about this town, because it was a city charge, it's going to be the mayor's court. So the city attorney and the mayor will be presiding over my case.
Wow.
Unless they recuse themselves.
Oh, my.
So the very man that I was investigating could very well determine the penalty as to what I'll get for this. Tell me if that's fair.
And, of course, Channel 2 there will be representing you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Chris Papst, as we wrap up, and we're up on the clock, but I want to just kind of wrap up here with you on this. Chris Nakamoto makes a good point. The more there is stonewalled information, the more it makes you suspicious. I remember covering a story years ago where we found out that the local leaders in a small municipality in Prince George's County, they were giving themselves what could be characterized as walking around money. They didn't want to be bothered submitting receipts for mileage and buying a cake for the Kiwanis Club or whatever, so they thought, we'll just give each other $2,000 a month, and it saves a lot of bookkeeping expense. So we did a series of stories on that, because without the receipts, you didn't know that this money wasn't going into the elected officials' pocket. And as Chris says, when they stonewall on simple things, it doesn't, I think, make the average person wonder, what else are they hiding?
I think it's fairly safe to say that Chris appears to be on to something with that report that he was doing. And that's why he got the reaction that he did. And oftentimes, the more pushback that I get on stories, the more motivated I am, because there's probably something there. They're not wasting their time pushing back because they're doing it because they enjoy it. I mean, there's a purpose behind the motivation of why they're not giving us this information. And especially for me, and Chris sounds like he's in the same mentality that I have, is that's what fuels us as investigative reporters to bring this information to light.
Chris Papst here, Chris Nakamoto. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks for calling in. We'll track your story as it moves forward. I hope you'll keep in touch with us and call in again.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Chris. We'll take a break. When News Talk returns, a simple yet potentially far-reaching proposal to change the way we elect members of Congress.